This recording will recap on cost behaviour. This is required for the flexible budget preparation. I will be making the assumption that you have already read through this handout and completed the questions. So looking at question 1, fixed costs of £5,000 per month when we produced 500 washing machines. Fixed cost for February will be the same, £5,000. The fixed cost per washing machine is £5,000 divided by 550. Which gives us 9.09. Production in March is 560, fixed cost for March, still £5,000 because they are fixed, but the cost per washing machine for March is now £5,000 divided by 560. Which is 893. So what we can deduce from question 1 is that fixed costs in total remains the same, but fixed costs per unit will fall as the output increases. Question 2, what will be the total fixed costs in April? It's 150 tables at £10 a table is £1,500. If 200 tables are produced in May, what will be the total fixed costs in May? They will still be £1,500. The important thing here is the fixed costs are fixed. So if they were £1,500 in April, they are £1,500 in May. What would change is that in May, the fixed cost per table would no longer be £10. It would be less than £10. So now we are moving on to variable costs. Variable costs vary in direct proportion to output. So filling in the first table, material cost per book is £5, and if we do 100 books, that would be £500. For 170 books, it is still £5 per book. Making £850 in total, and for 220 books, again still £5 a book, total of £1,100. Doing the same with labour, £2 per book, so for 100 books that's £200. For 170 books that's 340, and for 220 books that's £440. Just try and rub out this line here. That's it. So what we see here is that the variable cost per unit stays the same, but the total variable costs are increasing. So if we look at question 4, 500 pairs of shoes. Direct material cost is expected to be £1,500 in total. What would it cost if 700 pairs were produced? Well, we know it's a variable cost because it's direct material, and direct material is always a variable cost. So if we firstly work out the variable cost per unit by taking the costs and dividing by the units, it's £3 per unit. So now if we do 700 units, then it is 700 times 3, 2,100. And if we were to do 400 units, then it is 400 times 3, which is £1,200. So what we are seeing is that with the variable cost per unit remains the same, and we can use that to work out the total variable costs at different levels of output. The third type of cost is a semi-variable cost. This is partly fixed and partly variable, and you will usually have to use the high-low method to work out the part of the cost that is fixed and the part that is variable. This method is very important, so make sure that you understand it. So we take the highest level of activity and the corresponding cost. So that is the February activity and the February cost. And then we take the lowest level of activity and the lowest cost. So this is what we have here. To work out the variable cost per unit, it is the change in the costs divided by the change in the units. So that is £4,900 divided by 700, which gives us £7 per unit. We then use that to substitute back into either level of output. So looking at the February figure, the total cost in February was £41,150. We know it's £7 per unit variable cost, and in February there were 2,450 units. So the total variable cost, 2,450 times 7, and the difference between those two gives us the fixed cost. So we know the variable cost is £7 per unit and the fixed cost is 24,000. So using that method, question 5, we take the highest level of output and the cost that goes with it, and the lowest level of output and the cost that goes with it, take them away, so we can now work out the variable cost per unit, which actually I have made a mistake there. It's 2,100. the variable cost, 6,300 divided by 2,100, £3 per unit. We now work out the fixed cost. If we go to the highest level of output, the total cost is 44,400. We're going to take away the variable cost, which is £3 per unit for 9,800 units, and the difference will give us the fixed cost of £15,000. So high-low method to work out the variable cost and the fixed cost. We can now use that. If we're doing 10,200 units, the total cost would be the variable part and the fixed part, which we worked out to be 15,000. So the total cost would be 45,600. One more, because as I said, this is a particularly important method. So highest level of output and the cost, lowest level of output and the cost, variable cost is the change in the costs divided by the change in the units. £3.50 per unit, and then fixed cost, substitute that £3.50 back into either level of output. Again, I'll take the highest one. So at 1,800 units, the total cost is 18,300. If we take away the variable cost, which is 1,800 units at £3.50, we've got fixed cost of £12,000. Now please make sure you can do the high-low method confidently and quickly. So we can just use that figure to answer the last part of this question. For 2,000 units, the costs would be 2,000 times the variable cost plus the fixed cost. 2,000 times £3.50 plus the fixed cost of 12,000. £19,000. Sometimes you won't need to use the high-low method, depending upon what information has been given to you. So here, electricity is a semi-variable cost, and they'd already calculated the fixed cost for us. So it's £70,000. The fixed cost is 25. So the difference is the variable cost in total. And because there were 500,000 units, if we divide that by 500,000, then we have the variable cost per unit. So if we were to do 820,000 units, the variable cost, 820,000 times 0.1, and the fixed cost, which they told us was 25,000, and we've got the total cost, £107,000. So because they had told us the fixed element and the total, we were able to work out the variable part. Finally, stepped costs. Stepped costs are fixed for a certain level of output, and then they go up and remain fixed again. Hence, when plotted on a graph, they look like steps. So in this example, storage is stepped. Every 50,000 spent on storage, 10,000 units can be stored. So anything up to 10,000, it's going to cost us £50,000 to store it. As soon as we go over 10,000, the storage cost is going to go up to £100,000. If you imagine warehouses, so we've got a warehouse, and in this warehouse we can store 10,000 units, and it costs us £50,000. We've now got another unit. This warehouse is full. We need a new warehouse. This new warehouse is going to cost us another £50,000. So as soon as we go over the 10,000 units, we're incurring another £50,000 in storage costs. So if we had 10,001 units, it would be 10,000 in the first warehouse, 1 unit in the second warehouse, but the costs would be £100,000 because we've now moved into the second warehouse. And when the second warehouse is full, we'd move on to a third warehouse. So how much would the storage cost be for 8,000 units? So they would all be in the first warehouse that we're paying £50,000 for. How much would storage cost be for 15,000? So we'd have 10,000 in the first warehouse, 5,000 in the second warehouse, which means we've got 2 warehouses costing us £100,000. And 29,000 units, we've got 10,000 units in the first warehouse, 10,000 in the second, 9 in the third, which again is another £50,000. So it's costing us £150,000. So, question 8. Transport costs are stepped, and for every 100,000 cartons transported, it costs £25,000. So 75,000 cartons, that was within our first step, because our first step is up to 100,000. So that's going to cost us £250,000. Our second level goes up to 200,000, and we've got 180. So that's £500,000. And finally, 960,000. Now, rather than trying to draw little diagrams like I did for the previous one, there is another way to do it. If we are transporting 960,000 cartons and we have steps of 100,000, or you can think of it as lorries, each lorry will carry 100,000 cartons, we would need 9.6 lorries to transport 960,000 cartons. We can't have 9.6, so we would have to round it up. So we would have 10 lorries. Each lorry costs us 250,000.